Welcome back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real-life working screenwriter. I'm Tasha Hugh.
And I am Josh Hallman.
And we are Act Two again. Act Two is a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This podcast is just one of the things that we do. Thank you for joining us here. We also have a mentorship in partnership with Coverfly, if you didn't know. And we're wrapping it up because it's the last couple months of the year. But we start again next year with brand new mentors and brand new mentees. Yeah, head over to Coverfly to learn more information about that. And you can work with one of our awesome writers within our Act Two community. And it's a career mentorship, which is very cool. It's unique in that way, where it's not a craft mentorship where you're sending in your scripts and you're getting feedback. It's actually like, hey, how do I start my career? Or I'm at the beginning of my career and I just had this crazy meeting. What does that mean? Or how do I get that foot in the door? It's all of that kind of stuff, which is very cool.
As you were saying that, I realized I did not do that in your absence. I didn't say any of that. I just introduced the Act Two podcast.
Did you do an intro?
I did. I did an intro and then I just went into stuff. And as you were saying that, I was like, that's what I was missing.
Well, I'm glad I'm back. Did you have fun without me?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we were playing around. We were having so much fun. Tasha is back from Japan. She was gone for 2 weeks. We're going to get into it. I didn't mean to cut you off already within the first few minutes of the podcast. I'm just so excited. I didn't bother you with stuff, and then you got back, and I was just like, just waiting to text you about 40 different things, and I still have only done about 5 of them. So
you're very nice. Yeah, you did kind of leave me alone in Japan. You didn't have to. I'm always around.
I wish I knew that, but
actually, on my plane ride back, just because of the time travel, the time difference, the flight attendant was like, "You need to sleep. You need to sleep. You need to sleep. You need to sleep." And I was just up writing our spec. Sure. And I was like, I can't. I have to do this. She's like, but you're going to be so miserable when you land in Los Angeles. I was like, but I can't. I have to do this. She's like, are you a writer? I was like, yeah. She's like, okay, well, do you need a snack then to like power through?
I mentioned this on the last podcast, but you and I had the conversation over text, and you were saying, I'll get back on Saturday. We'll record, and then we'll be good for the podcast, and we'll get it up and running. And I just was thinking to myself, no, she's insane. Tasha's insane. She's going to be delirious. Dave was talking about it. He was like, that would have been the best episode ever.
Yeah, because I was going to arrive on Saturday in the afternoon. And because I'm coming from Tokyo, I was going to have 2 Saturdays, basically, and then record with Josh. I was a zombie. I've been a zombie until basically this morning. It's crazy. I don't know if I'm older or if just jet lag from Asia is always this bad, but I feel like when I was a teenager and I came back from Hong Kong visiting my family, I never had a problem.
Times are changing. You have a little more responsibility now. Got some things to do.
That's true, because before I could probably just like stay in bed for a few days and not worry about it.
Out. I am honored you wrote the script on the airplane back.
Of course.
Wow.
Always.
While you were time traveling.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What are we talking about today, Joshua? We got some This Week's in Writings, and then we have a topic.
We do have a topic. Chekhov's gun.
Yeah. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, this is exciting. We've been floating this around for a little bit, and I think it came up. I think you brought it up, and I was thinking about it, and I started to think a little more about it and how it's different from something like foreshadowing or a MacGuffin or these little things and why it's important. And you've actually brought it up before and similar. Anyway, we'll get into it.
Okay.
We'll get into all of it. Do you have a This Week in Writing?
I do.
How's it been since Tomb Raider's been released? Hey, congratulations on season 2.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, man. I'm so glad I went away, which this was planned to go away right when Tomb Raider drops, because I didn't want to like be obsessed with looking at people's opinions about the show. And everyone has an opinion. Boy, howdy. Does everyone have an opinion?
On the internet?
Yeah.
Oof.
I know, it's shocking. So it's been a mixed bag, I'll be honest. It's been extremely gratifying to see the really good reviews in like really impressive places. Like we were in The Guardian. Like The Guardian was talking about Tomb Raider and saying some awesome stuff about how it's a show that's kind of setting new standards for action women and women in action. And that was, if there's only that review, I still would have felt really great. So there's been a lot of really cool stuff that people have been responding to, people who have been going through grief themselves. And, you know, one of the themes is grief and the sort of the trauma that comes from losing people. And there are a lot of people who are taking that and feeling like they've been heard, or feeling like they now understand what they themselves are going through. And again, those kinds of things are why we write, which has been super cool. But then there's like the other side where people are threatening me, like, and yeah, like just being really mean. Not just like, nah, this show's not for me, which by the way, those are funny too. Where like I've sent you a few where people, because you work, like I worked so hard on this show, right? Like tearing my hair out. Like it's my thought when I wake up, my thought when I go to bed. And then people watch and they're like, meh. Like literally that's the review, which I laugh too, because like I do that, you do that, like we do that all the time. And we forget that sort of the backstory of every single piece of media we watch is someone obsessing about it for years of their lives. And meh.
Yeah, not for me.
Not for me.
Thanks,
it's
but no.
fine. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's been really interesting.
Listen, I would feel so accomplished if I were you, and you're gonna feel it again with season 2. The show's fantastic, and
thank you.
You're never gonna appease everybody, and especially when you're dealing with IP that people already have a preconceived notion about from 15 years ago, and they want things to be a certain way, and if it's not that certain way, then you know they're just not happy. But
yeah, expectations for IP is very interesting and probably worthy of a podcast. I'd love to get other IP writers on to talk about the burden that they've experienced, and both the good and the bad, and also the difficulty of taking a beloved IP and adapting it for a different kind of medium. I have a lot of friends who write in genre and who write based on IP, and a lot of them have said, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, because fandom can be so toxic that it's almost like not worth the rewards oftentimes. So I think it's an interesting topic.
Well, I have fantastic news for any angry fans out there. They have the ability to sit down and write exactly what they think they want to see. And I will read it. I will happily read it. I know you might not, but I'll read it. They're more than welcome to send it over and, you know, just arc out a season and the themes and the characters and everything you want to see in it. I'd be really interested to see what other people have to say. And
that would be fascinating.
Much time as they want into it. And
that would be fascinating.
Happily critique it. So, so yeah, welcome back.
Thank you. Season 2.
Season 2. Do we know when season 2 comes out?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
But it's coming.
Okay.
I like season 2 better than season 1, if I'm being honest.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I'm just putting that out there.
Wow. That's great. All right.
Pivot.
Well, should we do This Week in Writing?
This Week in Writing.
This Week in Writing.
All right, so I went to Tokyo. It was amazing. I'm not going to go into how amazing it was, though I want to.
Yeah.
However, a takeaway, I guess, as a writer, was how important getting out of your normal routine is and traveling. And I don't necessarily mean going to Tokyo, just going anywhere, really, because I went to a museum while I was there, the Samurai and Ninja Museum, which was a museum tailored for Tasha. And I was so inspired. I was so fascinated. My brain was just juiced up going through this museum that I like wanted to immediately go to a library and check out books and start writing. And I haven't felt that way in a really long time. And I think it's important to remember to go do these little side quests, right? Where like, even if it's just, I'm gonna not work today, or on a Saturday, I'm gonna go to the Arboretum and then go learn about these different trees.
Yeah.
Who knows? Like that might spark some, oh my gosh, like this tree could be used as poison. Like what if someone grew this tree and that, like whatever. It just suddenly all these ideas open up because you're just looking at the world in a new way. So if you feel stuck, if you feel like you're in a grind, if you don't feel inspired, take a little side quest. It does wonders.
I love that. No, that's great. I actually think about that often because sometimes I look at my phone too often, and you kind of get into this thing where you're being fed information that you're seeking out, and you're seeing things over and over, and it doesn't really expand your brain. But if you put that down, and obviously if you can't travel to a different country, but if you just want to get out and go somewhere, maybe you haven't been down in the city or wherever it is, I love doing that. I think it helps so much. Even if it's not great, you just, for a moment, you have like different idea of something. You see something new that you haven't seen before.
It's so important for writers to live a life and not just write, because otherwise what are we even writing about?
Yeah.
And it's great. Living life is great.
I feel like there's some connective tissue between what you just said and my This Week in Writing. Maybe.
Let's go.
Let's see. So I sent you this article about a script called Day Drinker.
Yeah.
It's something that sold recently, and the synopsis is, Day Drinker follows a cruise ship bartender who meets a mysterious day drinker, only for both of them to find themselves entangled in a criminal underbelly and connected in unexpected ways. It's going to be produced by Thunder Road. Stars Johnny Depp and Penelope Cruz. And this was one of those ideas that when I read it, I was like, how did I not think of Day Drinker as someone who will have some wine during the day? And I was thinking about how often this happens.
Is the script based on Josh?
Wait a minute. Hold on. and I was just thinking about, as a writer, how often this happens where you see that idea and you think, oh my goodness, how did I not think about that? Or, why didn't I think about that? And I spend so much time, I used to spend more time just kind of thinking, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? What if these scenarios go together? Or is there a story in this? And who would the characters be? Anyway, so I just read that, and it made me at first just be like, how did I not think of this? Then I got over it pretty quickly. But also, it made me realize how often you can talk yourself out of an idea for whatever reason. Like, that's been done before. That's what that really is just a scenario to put two opposites together in an action setting, in my opinion. I bet you that's what the film will be. So
yeah,
I guess my point is just don't talk yourself out of things. Try to think of some idea. And this happens all the time.
And I can see why you thought it was connected, because I agree with you. You wander around the world and you live a life that's not sitting at a desk and writing something. And suddenly you're like, oh shit, what if this happened?
Yeah.
Because you're like outside of your norm. You're doing something that's unusual, and therefore you're probably seeing things that are unusual. And that what if question suddenly starts coming up a lot.
Yeah, I thought about it because I actually used to I still have a friend who's a very creative guy. And we used to sit down, and when we'd hang out, if we'd have a drink or something, he would always come up with scenarios about people and say, what do you think this person's doing? And we'd kind of bounce off of each other and just make these elaborate stories about where someone just came from, where they're going, what they're doing at this place that we were at. It was always so much fun.
I do that all the time. I love that stuff.
Oh, God. I could people watch for hours.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we were, one of the things we did, we stayed in Kyoto in like this out of the city kind of place. And we were right by this river that abutted a mountain with forest. And it looked like this really ancient forest, which it probably was. And it looked like it was out of a King Kong or Godzilla movie. So I was constantly asking Paul, my husband, I was just like, what would you do right now if Godzilla came out? What would you do right now if a dinosaur came out? It's like different.
It's like, try to sleep. Yeah. Yeah, that's what you do. That's
That's
where
what
your
you do.
where your brain goes. If you don't do
Yeah.
that, then like what's the point? Are you even
Yeah.
living?
Yeah.
So Tasha,
Yeah.
before we get into the main topic,
Yeah.
and while you were gone, I thought of a new game for the
Okay.
Act 2 podcast, and I'm
Okay.
going to now throw it at you.
Oh,
It's
God.
a little bit of a rapid fire game. There's only 5 questions.
Oh, okay.
Are you ready?
I don't know.
I don't think so. So this is basically a would you rather game.
Oh,
But
God.
this version, it's a would you rather have written.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Are you ready?
I'm nervous.
John Wick or Nobody?
Nobody.
The Conjuring or The Ring?
Contrary. Easily.
Top Gun or Lord of the Rings?
Oh!
We're getting harder.
Oh, shit. You just blew my mind with that. I don't know how I can answer that.
I structured this so I could ease you into that, and then I knew it was coming. All right, so I'm gonna skip because this is like the difficult section. There's only 5 questions. You ready for the next one? This one's
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
go.
gonna say Maverick or Top Gun? Top Gun.
Top Gun. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna say Top Gun.
Wow. Okay, you ready for this one?
Yeah.
Harry Potter or Ever After?
You're a monster. Oh no!
Yeah.
Wait, is it like created Harry Potter or adapted the first book of J.K. Rowling's series? Like
I thought about that,
Yeah.
and I think it's adapting the first book. So you wrote the first movie. I'm going screenplay only.
I feel sick.
Yeah. I wish we had video of. Oh, well, we do have video. I wish someone could
God.
see what you look like right now.
What do you think I would pick in that one?
I think you would pick Harry Potter. I think it would kill you. I think there's no right answer for you, but I think you would pick Harry Potter.
I might pick Ever After.
Oh my God. I should have saved that one for last. You ready for the last one?
How can it get worse?
I should have already said this one. Toy Story or Wild Robot?
Oh, Toy Story.
Really?
Oh yeah, easy.
You didn't like Wild Robot?
Did you see it?
Yeah.
No, I did not like it.
All right.
Oh,
we're gonna
that's incorrect. It's not that I like actively disliked it. I was just like, oh okay.
Yeah. No. I know. Yeah. Okay.
It's the meh thing. These people fucking worked forever and loved it, and I'm like, eh.
No. I know you liked it because I know you liked it. I know that's not what you were saying. Okay. Shit. I should have put that one as number 2 or something. I
agree.
listed this out. Okay. That's it. That was the end of my game.
That's a great game, and I cannot wait to do it back to you. You're a mean man.
Should we go to the main topic?
Let's go. We're talking about Chekhov's gun. What is it? What does it mean? What are some examples of how it's used? And then also examples of how it's used poorly.
Yeah. That was a hard one. I have a couple examples.
Yeah. So Chekhov's gun comes from the Russian playwright and author Anton Chekhov, who was Russian. Did I say that? He lived in the late 1800s, and he's considered one of the greatest writers of all time. And he had this maxim in writing where he said, I guess, quote unquote, "One must never place a loaded rifle on the stage if it isn't going to go off. It's wrong to make promises you don't mean to keep." Mm-hmm. So this has been like a highly debated topic among authors, including Ernest Hemingway, who did not agree with this principle. But I think it's a really, especially in film and TV, and probably plays as well, it feels very important. And I want to be clear in differentiating it from like scene dressing or sort of just like characterization of things. Because, for example, if you have a character who is, let's say, a gun-toting hunter who lives in the middle of nowhere in Montana, and it's important that they have guns on their wall just because like it's like set dressing to understand who this person is. That doesn't mean you then have to use the gun that's on the wall in the movie that you're writing. That's not what it means. And also Chekhov's gun can be anything, as we'll get into. It doesn't literally have to be a gun. So as we start talking about these examples, we'll get into that idea that it doesn't, literally everything you put into a show prop wise doesn't have to be used. That's not what the Chekhov's gun principle is saying. But it's saying if you are highlighting something, an object, a character is playing with a bottle of pills, or there's a dripping faucet that people are dealing with constantly, like that has to pay off. Otherwise, we're left wondering, like, what the fuck was that about? Yeah. And you've definitely watched things where you felt that way. Or you've watched things where you said, man, like, they didn't use the space the way that I hoped they would. And that all comes from this Chekhov's gun idea not paying off well. So it's a setup of something, and then it's a payoff of something. That's really what Chekhov's gun is.
Right. It's interesting because you explained it so well just now, but I was thinking about examples of Chekhov's gun, and I started to read a few examples online. And there were a couple that I was like, oh, I guess that is a Chekhov's gun scenario. And I could dive into it, just to kind of give the example. The first thing that I thought of was James Bond movies. For me, it was, of course, no surprise here, it was gadget related. There's if you watch any James Bond film, anyone, James Bond is talking to Q, he's talking to whoever, and they're like, here's this new car that has wings and it can go underwater. And he's like, underwater? When am I ever going to have to do this? And then in the third act, all of a sudden, he's stuck in a corner and he has to jump off of a bridge that soars through the air, and then he submerges underwater and he's off and running.
For sure.
Great. Interestingly, another example I came across was the clock tower in Back to the Future.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And I didn't think about it because it was just mentioned so often in Back to the Future, and it's save the clock tower. And then in the perfectly structured Back to the Future in Act 3, Marty, when he has to take his ass home, he has to find when lightning strikes the clock tower at the exact right time.
Imagine if you have that setup of save the clock tower and lightning has struck the clock tower and ruined it and we need to repair it. If nothing ever happened with that, you'd be like, what the fuck was going on with this clock tower? Why'd they keep talking about it?
Interestingly, do you think in James Bond, well, I guess maybe because we know James Bond so well and we know his gadgets, but do you think that gadgets could be talked about and not used?
No.
I think they have to be used.
Yeah. I think your challenge becomes how to use it surprisingly. Like you said, and this goes underwater. Like you're thinking, Q is so ridiculous. And even James Bond is like, why would I ever need that? So there's this, the idea is planted in your head that this is absurd. And the joke of this moment is just how absurd Q is. And then by the end, he's using it and you're like, oh shit, that's so cool. And what gets me every time is that I fall for it when it's done well. Yeah. So, and I think a lot of authors and writers who argue about Chekhov's gun is that it can make your movie or show feel predictable, which is true unless it's used really well. And I think let's just go into examples of where it is used very well. If I'm going to take Lethal Weapon 2.
Yes.
Where his shoulder gets dislocated and he kind of makes a show of showing everyone in the police precinct how he can knock it back into place. And it just comes off as just man, this guy's crazy and he's willing to put his body through anything. He doesn't give a fuck, which is very much Mel Gibson's character in that series. But then later it actually has a plot purpose where he is tied up and then thrown in the water. And in order to get out, he has to dislocate his shoulder and then he relocates it again and he's fine. And that to me is amazing. It's such a, you forget about the dislocated shoulder until that moment. And then sort of the good audience member is oh shit, he could do the thing right now and get out of it. Oh, he's doing the thing right now. And it's so satisfying. So if you can pull off that kind of work, it pays off. It's really cool.
What's amazing about that is it also is kind of a character moment where everyone's like you were saying, he is insane. What is wrong with this guy? And then it comes back. Another example, which I might be stealing yours, is Iron Man. Which also I think might fall into the character meets Chekhov's gun, kind of a perfect overlap. When Iron Man, he has his bad heart. He gets a new heart that's even stronger in the first Iron Man. So then he ends up taking his old heart and putting it, I think Pepper Potts puts it in like a little case and says Tony Stark once had a heart, or it was kind of like this cute note.
Yeah.
And then later in the movie, something happens to him and his heart is like failing and he ends up needing to use his old one and put it back in. And so what was this sweet little moment of proof that Tony Stark had a heart ends up saving him. And it's just one of those things where you think you've moved on from it, but lo and behold, it's just still there.
Yeah.
And it's front and center.
Yeah. It's very good.
I'm gonna bring up another example, unless you have some. I'm just talking.
I have one.
I'm just fired up right now. Okay, go.
So when I was talking about jet lag for my Tokyo trip, someone said, take off your shoes and go walk in a park. And that will help you with jet lag because your body will adjust to the place you're in. And they're like, it's like in Die Hard. I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Like in Die Hard. I was like, oh shit. In Die Hard, it's so iconic that Bruce Willis doesn't have his shoes and he has to like walk across glass, and like that's just a big hurdle he has to face across the movie. And it comes from the very opening when nothing seems to be happening yet, and Bruce Willis is told by a buddy, hey, your cure for jet lag is take off your shoes and walk around and you'll be fine. And that's why he doesn't have shoes for the whole thing. That is also an example of Chekhov's gun, because his buddy could say that and then either nothing happens, he doesn't take off his shoes, or he does take off his shoes and then just simply puts them back on when the action starts. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't. It leads to this huge problem for him across the whole movie. So that is a really good execution of Chekhov's gun.
While you were saying that, I was thinking about when I failed at using Chekhov's gun in one of my scripts. And I almost wish we had this conversation before I had written this script years ago. If you can remember, it was a script called Rent a White Guy.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Which, just to clarify, was based off of an article that was also called Rent a White Guy.
It was real.
It was
great.
It's a real thing.
I love the story.
It's a real thing. But my version was, of course, turned into an action film where, I don't know if you remember this, but my guy, who's kind of like a handyman back in the States, and he had a kind of rough life, but he just had this uncanny ability to just fix things and build things and all these little things. But so when he gets into China later in the story, he's getting chased by a gang and he's trying to like fix things and like things that I wish. My point is I could have done a better job of set up and payoff throughout like the second active scene, for instance, a coat hanger and like a water bottle. And I remember having notes where people were like, well, how did he know how to do that? And there was all these things where I could have set it up a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I just was reminded of it was like the bad version of Die Hard. Like I remember trying to set it up, but not doing a great job with it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think Chekhov's gun, something I was thinking about when we were like kind of doing notes for this topic too, was it's not necessarily something you just come up with right
Correct.
away. Like these are like the dislocated shoulder, even the lightning tower, the clock tower in Back to the Future. My guess is, not knowing the true story, my guess is those things came in after. Like they realized, fuck, how is Marty going to get back in time? Well, what if we set up something that he would know? Okay, clock tower. Like I bet it kind of came that way versus it being in the first pass. So I feel like writers, we often give ourselves a hard time that we didn't come up with things right away. But a lot of this stuff is layers that we put upon stuff. And I have an example of when it happened for me in a, like I did poorly. Like it can happen in dialogue, the Chekhov's gun problem. Like I had this scene where characters were going off with someone who may or may not be a villain. You're not quite sure at this point in the story, but they're going off with this villain. And one of the heroes stays behind and pulls aside another hero and says, hey, like, watch that person. Make sure they don't get the thing that we're after. Like, think of it as like Mission Impossible. Make sure that guy doesn't get the thing we're after.
Yeah.
And the other hero responds, don't worry, I'm on it. And then the scene progresses. And then as the scene progresses, that character who said, don't worry, I'm on it, never actually does something to directly thwart the villain. A different character does. And that's just because just the way that it plays out, it made more sense for this other character to actually be the one who thwarts this villain. And so the dialogue no longer paid off. And so I had to go back and change that dialogue because it didn't pay off. But those are things that sort of come after, because it was in that character's voice to say, don't worry, I got this. And then just the way the scene progressed, I was like, oh shit, I can't actually have the character in the room for that moment. So, okay, I got to go back and fix it. So I say that example as a way to say, A, like, I fuck things up too. And B, Chekhov's gun is something that you work on, that you have to really like finesse as you write.
Yeah, that's a really good point and interesting because you don't really think about it at first. Probably in the gadgets for Bond is a good example of.
Yeah.
They're probably like, okay, well, this happens, and then it's not until a little bit later or a pass down the road or a late outline that they figure out, oh, well, he can get out of this situation by this, and we can set it up here. I guess there's probably some very obvious times where if you're doing like a murder mystery, for instance, I'm sure there could be something like we've talked about when we were outlining ours, is maybe you set something up because it has to be there and you know that's going to pay off later, but usually it feels like it probably comes a little bit later.
Yeah, I definitely feel like we're going to be adding some Chekhov's gun stuff in later passes.
Should just write a spec called Chekhov's gun.
Yeah, we should.
Another example I had. This might, now that I'm thinking about it, because after this I want to talk about the difference between this and foreshadowing, because I feel like there's a little bit of a overlap, but I was thinking of Shawshank. When he gets the little rock hammer and he talks about how much he likes to carve rocks and this and that. And you don't really hear about it again. But then at the very end, he used this little freaking thing to carve his way out of Shawshank.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessarily... I was trying to think of ones that seem like a Chekhov's gun scenario and also might just be a, I don't know, plot device or foreshadowing situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, can I throw out some examples of times it didn't work, the Chekhov's gun scenario? Okay. The first thing I thought of, and tell me if I'm wrong, one of my favorite shows of all time, ever, Lost.
Yeah.
It had the numbers that they would have to plug when they were inside that area underground. And I don't think that ever paid off. There was like a very important part of the show.
Yeah.
And those numbers never really paid off.
I feel like there are a few things in that show that didn't pay off.
Yeah.
Because they just had so many things. It was
I
so
forgive
cool.
them all.
100%. But that's a good example.
And then, at the end of The Force Awakens, when Rey finds Luke Skywalker and gives him the lightsaber, and then the movie ends. And then The Last Jedi begins with Luke Skywalker taking that lightsaber and tossing it over his shoulder, leaving some fans disappointed.
Yeah.
Some, maybe not. But I just felt as though in that time, that was a Chekhov's gun, leaping one movie to the next. You were just waiting for it to pay off. You're like, oh my God, something's going to happen with Luke and his lightsaber. And then it never ended up happening. Those are just two prime examples I could think about.
I like that. I like those examples.
Okay.
So I talked a little bit before about how when we watch something and we have this feeling of being let down, that, oh, this was a missed opportunity, they should have done this, how oftentimes it's a Chekhov's gun problem. And a scene that came to mind would be if an action scene takes place in a kitchen, or let's say you're doing a movie just that's about chefs, but eventually a fight takes place in the kitchen. We would all be very disappointed if none of the knives or pots or boiling things of water were used in the fight, right? Because that is a Chekhov's gun. You've set up this location that has very specific things in it. Why aren't you then using it when a normal person would probably use them? So that to me is sort of a way for the audience to feel let down. Another example would be if your character plays with like a prop samurai sword in their room in Act 1. Then they hang it over their bed because it's just decor really for them. But every now and again they take it down and play with it and think they're cool. And that's just a fun character beat in Act 1. But later, when a serial killer is stalking them in this horror movie that you've created and they've trapped themselves in their room, if they don't grab the samurai sword, you have failed yourself as a writer and failed the audience as well. Because why are you showing and highlighting this item if you're not going to use it later?
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes when you're writing and you're in a scene and you're playing with the samurai sword, as a writer, you're thinking, oh, this is really funny, or this is fun, and this is a cool character moment. But you have to pay it off if in that scenario that you just talked about.
Yeah. And it could be paid, like, let's say you're writing a comedy. So, like, he's never going to actually use it to kill someone. But, like, let's say he buys, do you know those, you would know this, those rope licorices that are, like, really long?
Are you saying that because I love licorice?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I do know.
Let's say he buys one of those from like a 7-Eleven or something, and then out in the parking lot he starts like wielding it like a sword to just like make his friends laugh, or like to just do whatever. Like, okay, and then at least that's paying off. That idea is paying off. And that's something that actually, like, I don't do very well. I don't do payoffs very well. I forget that I've like laid something down, because often for me those things will be character moments for me. Yeah, a character who just has a samurai sword and is like doing their thing in their room and then puts it back up on the wall is just a character thing for me. Mm-hmm. And then it often will take someone to be like, well, you should pay that off somehow. For me to be like, oh, fuck, I should pay that off. That would be so cool if I paid off the samurai sword thing.
Yeah.
I don't often think about it on my own. So I also love this topic because it's something that I need to be better at thinking about.
Yeah, I was recently working on something with someone in there, and I was reading his version of a draft, and there was something that was not, or that was set up but was not paid off, and I ended up tweaking it, and I still forgot to pay it off. Like, it's something, one of those things. It can go overlooked so easily, but when you call attention to it, you just have to do something with it.
Yeah. Do you want to go into how it's different?
Yeah, let's just go into this real quickly.
Yeah.
The difference between this and foreshadowing. Essentially, foreshadowing it's just a hint of what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think foreshadowing is more, you're doing little items to hint that something is going to happen, that hint at danger is going to happen. For example, danger. Or, dinosaurs are going to happen. And the reason I understand why it can be confusing is that foreshadowing can also rely on objects. And as we said about Chekhov's gun, it can be an object, it can be dialogue, it can be the dislocated shoulder of Riggs. It can be a lot of different things. But I think the setup and payoff is more direct in a Chekhov's gun. I mean, think of it in that gun example. If you have a gun, it should go off. Versus foreshadowing could be a gun. It could be a gun in the room, and the gun in the room is meant to suggest violence is going to happen, and that's fine. I think that is also equally fine if foreshadowing is what you're doing with the gun in the room and it's not random that a gun is in the room, right? So, like, do one or the other. Pay it off, or use it as foreshadowing, or use it as character building, or use it as something. Don't just, like, place objects in a room or have a character dislocate their shoulder and nothing comes of it. Like, that's sort of where the difference comes in, if that difference makes sense.
It makes all the sense. It's easy to confuse, though.
Yeah, I can see why that's confusing. Because, like, also the example you gave about Shawshank, because he doesn't use a hammer to get out, right? He uses like a spoon or something.
No, he carves with the hammer.
Oh, he does use the hammer?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Maybe a better Shawshank example is that big poster he gets.
Yeah.
That ends up covering the hole that he ends up carving the wall.
Yeah. Maybe.
It's weird because as we were discussing this topic, I thought I had such a perfect, clear view.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I know exactly what Chekhov's gun is. But then when you start thinking of examples, it's definitely up for debate.
There's gray area with foreshadowing.
There's gray area. And this is why when you were saying, do you want to describe what it is? I knew you would give better description because I was like, well, I think I just know it. It's one of those, it's like a color. I can't really describe it. I just know it.
Yeah. If I saw it, I would know it. I think regardless, the idea is it needs to pay off. Whether
Yes,
you're
that's it.
using it as foreshadowing or you're using it as an item that pays off story-wise, then regardless, it has to pay off.
Yeah.
And sometimes that happens at the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th draft.
Yeah.
But when you do add an object or you do add a moment that feels so specific to a character or a world you have, I think ask yourself this question right away. How can I pay this off? Or is this something that can be paid off? How can I be clever with this later on? And maybe you just hold that thought in your head until you get into the 3rd act and the 2nd act and you find the perfect place for it.
Yeah.
But I think now that we're having this conversation, it's something I want you all to be aware of as you're writing and as you're setting things up.
Yeah. And I think the best ones are the ones that are done in a very simple, nuanced kind of way. And if you can tie it into character, that's the greatest feeling.
Yeah.
Like Riggs in his shoulder.
Yeah.
Well,
We did it. We're back.
we're friggin' back.
Quote of the day.
Let's go.
The most regretful people on earth are those who felt the call to creative work, who felt their own creative power restive and uprising, and gave to it neither power nor time. Mary Oliver.
Wow.
I know. Ouch. Please remember to rate and subscribe. Follow us at ActTwoWriters for more awesome writing stuff. You can follow me, Tasha, at Story Thursday on Instagram or on Twitter at Tasha 3.0.
I'm Joshua Hallman on Twitter, Josh Hallman on Instagram.
And as always, the Act Two podcast is a production of Act Two, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This episode was edited by Paul Lundquist.